The two Project Gotham Racing games on the original Xbox did well critically, as the first game got 85 out of 100 and the second game got 90 out of 100 on Metacritic. Even though I wasn't really a fan of the first game, I thought the second game couldn't get any better. One of the reasons for this is that I think the game was pushing the Xbox to its limit, among with other games such as Forza Motorsport. Project Gotham Racing 2 did very well in terms of sales, and so a third game was released 2 years later in Q4 2005, and it was developed by Bizarre Creations, just like the first two games, but for the then very new Xbox 360, and it is almost completely different to the first two games. The game's career mode is set up a little bit differently. Instead of unlocking cars with kudos tokens, the game gives the player 85,000 credits, and that is enough to get a fast car. And so I bought a Noble M400, which I do have an issue with. According to Wikipedia, Project Gotham Racing 3 emphasises supercars and special models instead of generic production cars. So there are no slowish cars in the game, like the Audi RS6 Avant and Honda S2000, which were both in the second game. I do like that the developers changed the way that you start the game and acquire cars, which was the direction that a lot of games were going in, thanks to the Gran Turismo series. The events are also a lot better. There are a lot of different types of events spread out across 4 cities, which are Las Vegas, London, New York City, and Tokyo, with a few events on the Nürburgring. There are so many different event types, and that means the game doesn't get boring for quite a while. So much so that I played through all of the events at once, and it was quite easy to do. But then you have to play them again to get 100%, which is a bit of a problem. Doing the same event twice to get 100% does sound a little bit weird, but the reason why you have to do that is because you have to get a platinum medal on every event. There are 4 difficulties in the game which correspond to what medals you win, so you've got bronze, silver, gold and platinum. You can get through all of the events and just get silver, but you will only complete about 50% of the game. What you can do is use the cars that you have bought and go back to the beginning of the career mode and start winning on the platinum difficulty, and you will win more money for doing so. I think this is the way that the developers intended the game to be played, as doing all of the events once doesn't make the game that long, and doing events on the platinum difficulty with your starting car is a bad idea, no matter how good at the game you are. I think it would have been better to reward the player with new cars or something, instead of forcing people to play on the hardest difficulty if they want to get 100% completion. There is also a replayability factor to consider as well, as I got very bored playing through the events that I had already done, just for a platinum medal and a few more credits. You also have to collect more kudos points to get some of the platinum medals as well. Project Gotham Racing 3 continues to use the kudos system for some aspects of the game, such as unlocking cars. Just like in the first 2 games, you collect kudos points by drifting around corners, overtaking the AI, drafting, and a few other things. If you hit a wall before your kudos points have been banked, then you will lose them. In some events you need to collect a certain amount of them to get a medal. Doing all of that does get hard in some of the events, especially when you try to get all of the platinum medals. But at least it doesn't get laborious, like it does in other games. The physics has a lot to do with that. I really like the physics as they didn't really change from the second game. It's not too arcade-like, but it's also not a simulator or even a simcade. There is only one game that I can think of that feels the same, and that is Need for Speed Shift. You've also got the playtime game mode as well. This game mode is a lot of fun, but for one reason only. You can create your own custom routes in any of the 4 cities that are in the game. You have to select a start-finish line and then create a route based off a small map. It's not too in-depth like in Forza Horizon 4, which is understandable seeing as Project Gotham Racing 3 is somewhat 13 years older, but it would have been nice to have more of the city to create a route in. The game says that you can create more than 100 million custom routes. I don't think you can create that many, but there are a lot of routes that can be created. I do like the route creator, but it would have been nice to have been able to race on my created tracks in the career mode. The way that the developers set up the game's career mode kind of ruins the tracks, because the fact that you have to race on them more than you should makes them a bit boring. So I think the game could have benefited from a few more tracks. But all tracks from all 4 cities and the Nürburgring look brilliant. It's hard to say anything else about them, as Project Gotham Racing 3 was one of the first racing games in the 7th generation, and so I can't fairly compare them to anything else. Project Gotham Racing 3 has 80 cars from 30 manufacturers, and pretty much all of them are on the more expensive end because, as I said near the beginning of the review, Project Gotham Racing 3 emphasises supercars and special models instead of generic production cars. You do end up earning a lot of money quite quickly, so you wouldn't have been driving the slower cars for very long anyway, but it would have been nice for those cars to have been included in the game from a collection standpoint. The developers did kind of fix this by adding the Mini Cooper S, Pontiac GTO and the Mitsubishi Evo as DLC, but those cars were only really worth downloading if you were starting the career mode. It all goes back to the way that the career mode is structured. There are some nice additions to the car list, such as the Elfin MS8 Streamliner, Ferrari 288 GTO Evolution and the Aston Martin DBR9. Most of the car models look good, but some of them look a bit off, like the Jaguar XKR. But other than that, I do like the way that the cars look. Well, most of them anyway. But the car list could have had a bit more variety, and I'm not talking about the fact that the developers removed SUVs, as SUVs are a bit weird in a track-based racing game. Project Gotham Racing 3 is a good racing game, and it's pretty much the only track-based racing game on the 7th generation when it was released. But I did prefer the second game in a lot of ways, because the developers took this game in a different direction, as that was what other developers were doing at the time. The car list isn't as good as it was in the second game, and neither is the career mode. I do like the route creator, and it made the game different to every other racing game that was out at the time, which was mainly on the generation before, and that's why I didn't make that many comparisons in this review, as I thought that would be a bit unfair. I am going to recommend Project Gotham Racing 3. It's just a different experience, and this is the only game in the series to use credits and not the kudos system, which turns out does make a difference. This has been my review of Project Gotham Racing 3 on the Xbox 360. If you liked this review, then please give it a like. If you didn't, then give it a dislike, and if you want to see more, then please consider subscribing and joining the Discord server linked in the description. Goodbye.